Hey everyone, I'm Emre. Welcome. Really excited to chat with you all today around occupancy planning. We've been on the road with a lot of different customers the last few weeks talking about using density data to optimize space allocations to different teams. And it's just such a different world being able to do this with the data from density sensors instead of badging and other data sets. So we thought we would take some time to share our learnings with you and hopefully start a conversation around data-driven occupancy planning. So we'll spend the next 15-20 minutes kind of running through some of our latest work, how we think about the problem, and would love to kind of spend time at the end on questions. So please feel free to message us with your questions throughout. And then whatever we don't get to at the end, we'll follow up after the fact. So thank you again for joining. Let me just share my screen and we can dive in. So the goal of today is to walk through how we've been helping different customers return, basically drive return in their real estate portfolios by needing to have fewer square footage of space for the same employee base through data-driven occupancy planning. And so for a quick introduction, I'm Emre. I lead our accounts team here at Density, which is our flavor of customer success. And we kind of embed in on the real estate teams of a lot of our big customers and help them get to value by measuring space. And so a lot of that work as of late has been around occupancy planning. And that's because offices are not being used efficiently. So one of our customers, which we'll talk about in a bit, came to us a little over a year ago and was like, we have all the square footage, tens of millions of square feet of space. We're bringing teams back into the office, but we still think a lot of space is unused. But we can't actually act on reducing our footprint efficiently because the teams that we're trying to bring back keep saying they need desks, they need meeting rooms in order to attract their employees back to the office. So it creates this tension of we know there's a lot of unused space, we don't know exactly what spaces are unused, which creates inefficiencies. And so that creates a lot of problems for occupancy planners because occupancy planners are basically specialists in playing this game of Tetris, taking buildings, tens of millions of square feet, and do an exercise of how much space to allocate to which teams based off of how frequently they come in, what types of spaces they need. And it's very much an intense both art and science. And there's one individual named Terry who I've had the chance to spend some time with at one of our customers, and he's responsible for this in a 20 million square foot real estate portfolio. And it's just crazy the number of variables that inform this. And so what's interesting about occupancy planning historically is that there's not a lot of actual data on what specific spaces different teams use. And so our challenge together was to kind of figure out how do we use density data that gives really precise measurement of desks, meeting room usage, specific spaces on a floor, and use that to uplevel occupancy planning. So we're going to walk through how we do that. The source of this data are density occupancy sensors. So this is what the sensor looks like in our latest generation on the right. It's radar-based, super precise, measures 10 to 16 times per second, and it's not a camera. And so the data set we have doesn't have any PII, so no gender, age, or ethnicity, but gives us a really rich data set about human beings in space and exactly where they are. And so this is a kind of visualization of what the raw data looks like that then gets, analyzed by all of our algorithms on top. But a collection of cones here, kind of where the mouse is on the right-hand side, is a person. So you can see there's a desk neighborhood at the top right where 2 to 3 people are working out of. There's meeting rooms on the left-hand side where we can see people in space. But we can get, like I said, extremely precise measurement of humans on a floor, at a desk, in a meeting room, walking around in a way that we can't with other data sets like badging or Wi-Fi. And so from this data, we can understand how busy a given floor is. And as the floor gets busier, what happens to different spaces on the floor. So kind of like supply versus demand. And so we expose this self-serve in our analytics interface called Atlas. And you're seeing that here on the right-hand side. And one of the coolest things in here is for, every minute of every single day historically since the building has been online and under measurement. We'll be able to see how many people are coming into the floor, and as those folks come in, how many desks are used, how many meeting rooms are used, what's the right number of people, or the number of people using meeting rooms, are they being used as designed? And so all of that data is inside of our system. And so translating this into an occupancy planning world, one of the recent customers that we've partnered with this on actually analyzed data from Atlas, and we analyzed it together with them for 3 floors. And we broke down all the different desks on the floor by their neighborhood allocations by team. So kind of 1 or 2 levels below their executive team. And we had a mix of all the different desk allocations. And we actually determined that between 26 to 45% of those desks were unused on any given day. And actually, it was 45% of the desks were unused on any given day, and you could load at minimum 26% more people without running out of meeting rooms. And so I want to kind of walk you through the actual visualizations we use to arrive at this. And the result is that this company will need to lease fewer square footage of space because each floor will be more efficient. So the first thing we did is we looked at desk usage. Desk usage is one of the most fascinating things that we measure because the perception of a team and how much they use their desks and how they actually use it is rarely the same across all of the customers we work with on this type of analysis. And so what we're seeing here is 3 teams that are allocated between 20 desks for team 1 up to 200 desks for team 3 at the bottom. And we're plotting on each day the number of their allocated desks that are used at least 1 hour and at least 3 hours a day. And so the green area is the number of desks that are unused on each team's busiest days. And so you can see team 2 doesn't use 59 of their 59 of their allocated desks. Team 3 doesn't use 56. And oftentimes when we talk to occupancy planners, their stakeholders who actually run these teams frequently will give feedback of, oh, we need more desks, or we need a 1-to-1 seating ratio for our employees. And this data is quite helpful to push back and say, is that actually true, or are there other issues in the space that we need to focus on because we don't see you using 60 out of your 140 desks? So that's step 1. Now, step 2 is we're very conscious of the fact that a floor, or why you go to work from a floor, is not only to work from your desk, you're also collaborating in open collaboration areas and in meeting rooms. And so the next thing we look at in occupancy planning is, as a floor gets busier, what happens to meeting room availability? And we use a metric we call saturation, and I'll kind of describe how we read this chart. So this is for one floor. On the x-axis, we plot how busy the floor is between 0 and 100% of its design for capacity. And then on the y-axis, we plot over the study period. Each dot is a 15-minute interval at a certain floor utilization, and it shows the percent of meeting rooms in use at the same time. So if you had a dot that was at the far right of this chart, it would mean the floor was at 100% capacity. And when it was at 100% capacity, 100% of the meeting rooms on that floor were in use at the same time. Now, why this matters is we want, as the floor gets busier, for the number of meeting rooms or the percent of meeting rooms in use to kind of linearly correlate with how busy the floor is. But oftentimes this isn't the case. So we'll see things like this, like if there's a bunch of dots over here where even if the floor is only 20% full, meeting rooms are running out. That's usually when employees are using meeting rooms kind of like private offices. And then in some cases, if, this is more rare, but if the teams on floors just don't use meeting rooms, you'll see a much flatter curve that looks like this. So when we work on an occupancy planning analysis, we will analyze meeting room availability side by side, or meeting room saturation side by side with the number of unused desks on each floor. And from this, we can predict how much busier the floor could be without running out of meeting room space. And so because these two things are linearly correlated for most offices, like floor busyness and the percentage of meeting rooms in use, this green area forms the kind of lower bound usually of our opportunity, which is we could have at least 106 more people on this floor and expect to still have enough meeting room space under current usage patterns. So the return on this is being able to say we can load at least 106 more folks onto a floor without running out of meeting room space. We could probably increase that even more if we're comfortable based off of the number of unused desks. And so the way we think about the return is the cost of measurement of the floors that we measure. And then the savings is how many additional floors does that company not need to lease or manage by loading more employees onto the floors that we measure. And so said differently, it's kind of like if we measure a 12-story building and we realize that, you know, there's 1/4 additional capacity, like 25% additional capacity, you no longer need to lease 3 additional floors worth of space. And so when we modeled this out with one of our customers for one building where we measured 3 floors, the return was about 1.02 million in annual savings. And the cost to measure those 3 floors was $137,000 a year for density. And so that's a 7.4x return. We just did this for another building, same customer, and it's between an 8 to 16x return because a lot fewer desks are used in that building that we measured. So just outsized impact. The cool part about this too is it's not just about operating those floors. It's also about leasing and building out additional space. So I was with one of our customers last week in Washington, D.C., and he shared with me that it costs between $400 and $500 a square foot to build out new space in San Francisco and New York and some of their other markets. And it's about $700 a square foot for their cafe, and then, you know, $350 for workstation floors. So blended, it's between $400 and $500. And his observation was, if we can use density to avoid building out one additional floor in these markets, it will effectively pay for measurement in that region of all of our other spaces. So there's just an outsized impact to being able to load these floors more intentionally than what badging data or Wi-Fi data or anecdotal data about a team using a space gives these occupancy planning teams. So to kind of summarize the way that we work with our customers to help facilitate occupancy planning with density, the premise is by giving visibility into specifically what spaces individual teams use, we can enable a really data-driven decision on how many more people can we load onto a floor without compromising employee experience, and you know, activate the floor very intentionally, and then realize a return on that investment of measurement of those floors by not needing additional space, not needing to lease it, not needing to operate it, and not needing to build it out. And so, yeah, that's kind of the way we approach occupancy planning. There's also like one last anecdote I will share with a different customer we were in person with last week. Is they shared feedback that when the occupancy planners interact with their stakeholders, like VPs, business partnering, VPs from different teams, those teams have a lot of power because they run large organizations and they want their employees back in the office. And one of the ways they want to do that is by giving everyone great spaces to work. And so without a really accurate data set, it's hard to push back on those teams and say, no, we don't actually think you need the number of desks that you say you need, because it's kind of a anecdotal pushback. And so the conversation, it looks very different when you can show that team by their individual leads how many desks are being used, and then have a conversation around, does team 2 really need all these desks, or is there another way we can better support them? And can we adjust the number of employees we assign or allocate to a neighborhood of desks based off of data? And it's just a totally different conversation, and one that's quite empowering for occupancy planning, and also great for the team leads, because as a team lead, I don't want the number of desks my team gets to be based on a number that's a desk sharing ratio that says for every desk we're going to assign 1.2 employees, and I don't even know how that number is calculated. And so I would much rather have by region, by office, desk allocations adjusted for my team proactively based off of how they actually use the space. So that is occupancy planning with density. We will transition now to talking about some of your questions. And so feel free to drop them in the chat, and I will open this up and we'll run through a few of them here. And then whatever we don't have time for, like I mentioned, we'll follow up. So the first question in the chat is, can I use badge swipe data or Wi-Fi data to do something similar versus having to use sensors? So the short answer is no. And a lot of the folks we've worked with have actually tried to do this with existing data sets in a building, and I'll explain why. So for badge swipe data will usually show you how many people came into a building. But it doesn't tell you necessarily what floor those folks go to and whether or not they're actually using the desks or meeting rooms on that floor. So an example of this is we measure a building in Sunnyvale where a lot of employees will just come in for lunch and then leave. But if you use that to make occupancy planning decisions, you'd be assuming that everyone who badges in actually uses their desk, and that's just not true. So um, yeah, badging data is useful to figure out team attendance by office, like for return to office policies, for example. But it's not great for occupancy planners because you can't tell whether or not those folks are actually using their desks or meeting rooms on their floor. Wi-Fi is a bit different. So the challenge with Wi-Fi is a couple things. One, it's really hard to get precise data about whether someone actually used a particular desk in a neighborhood, just because of the triangulation. It's not quite accurate. And so again, you run into this problem of you have to make an assumption of everyone who is in the building or on the floor used their allocated spaces, which is not true. And then the other thing is it's these buildings, and we actually just did a call recently where we talked about this. Buildings have so many devices in them, and each one of those devices has a MAC address. And it's really hard to distinguish, like to cut that down to the actual number of people in a space. And so it's a very noisy data set, and makes it hard to do something like this where you can see exactly where on a floor people are. You have the challenge of, do you have multiple devices, like your watch and your phone and your laptop may all be connected to the internet. And so we haven't been able to replicate this with a Wi-Fi data set to date with some of our customers. Okay, so the second question is, members of my team in one of our offices keep saying they need more space. Would sensors be able to help me with a solution? 100%. So I'll share a story of one of our customers that I was meeting with. They have an office in New York that's just running out of space. Um, and they're planning to build out additional floors. And like I said before, like absent sensors, they just don't have data on how much of those spaces are actually used by their employees and what's even the right way to design these new floors. And so it is a no-brainer to measure those existing floors for this company in New York, because if we can do the same analysis and prove that maybe we need, one fewer or two fewer floors than we were planning on by making the existing floors more efficient and more efficiently designing the new floors, that's an entire floor, multiple floors worth of leases and build outs avoided. And so one of the sweet spots for our work around this are buildings that are really important that you intend to keep in the long term, and maybe are even thinking about expanding where you're not sure yet. We had a similar story with one of our financial institution customer in San Francisco. Their employees were asking for more space, and they avoided a multi-million-dollar new lease plus build out by measuring the existing one and kind of proving that there were some adjustments they could make to make the space more efficient, but they didn't really need a whole entire, larger floor, larger building worth of space. So if you have more questions, please feel free to follow up with us. My email is my first name, so emre@density.io. You can also reach out to me directly. And we would love any feedback or thoughts and to work with you and hear your own kind of occupancy planning stories. It's been a pretty awesome collaboration with a lot of our customers, and we're excited to grow it from here. So thank you all. Have a really good rest of your day. And thanks for making time. See you soon. Bye bye.